over to the dark side. This is really even hard to talk about. I will confess, each week I show up, I have something to talk about, and I have something to share with the people who are interested in paying any attention to this. This is a tiny group of people, but not insignificant. Oh, as a side note, several of my clients wait each week voraciously, wanting to see what I'm going to put up next. That's a strange experience. That in itself probably should be written about. What happens if you decide to put up a lot of material and you have a clientele and they find out about it and they want to know what's coming next and they want to comment to you about what you've been doing? That didn't used to exist before there was a lot of social media presence around. Be that as it may, it's always been important to me to be real. So up until now, most of what I put up, I feel really proud of. And these are the nicer parts of me. These are things that I respect about myself, mainly. Of course, I'm willing to say I've been sloppy sometimes or made mistakes, and some of them have been about idiocies I've done. But I am human, and there are things that are very hard for me to talk about. And I, I made a decision I move deeper into this. I am not going to keep any topics secret. So today I'm going to talk about things that are hard to talk about, and I will do the best I can. One of the problems is that I'm violating what I need to do to get my imagined mother off my back. I am going to be less than admirable. I'm going to be less than worthwhile. I'm going to be less than sensible. And my mother always said I shouldn't have been born. I am going to be giving her proof about why I shouldn't have been born, instead of being driven to prove over and over again that it was worthwhile that I be born. Here are ways where it may not have been so worthwhile that I got born. And this is a really painful topic for me. I'm going to talk about my experience of parenting. And I'll start off by telling you the grade I would give myself. The grade is probably a C minus. I'm not very happy with myself as a parent. Uh, and I will describe what have been the problems with my parenting, how I got into messes I've gotten into, what I've done or failed to do about messes I've gotten into, and about my confusion about what, if anything, more I should do about my parenting. Trying to even become a parent was hard in the beginning. I was in a bad marriage. Uh, Sexuality between myself and my former wife was all clouded up. It was forced. It was unpleasant. She didn't like having sex. I kept trying to figure out ways that I could please her sexually, and I was unsuccessful. So we were not a couple who enjoyed being sexual. But we decided we were going to have children because that's what people did. It was almost unthought about, unthinkable to anybody in my generation that you didn't grow up and get married. Even if you were gay, you got married and tried to pretend you were straight. And you grew up, you got married. That was the only esteemed destination for adulthood. And then after you got married, you had children because that's what you were supposed to do. You were supposed to have children. So here I was already in my late 20s. We had made a detour because I went to graduate school, but finally we were back in Southern California together. She was teaching school and I was starting my practice, and we had a marriage. The marriage had lasted for several years already. It was time to begin having children. And of course, everybody in our respective families would nag us. When are we going to have children? When are we going to have children? And by the time we got married, I was 21 and 20, and she was 20. Half of all the people we went to college with had already gotten married. So we were not fast about doing that, even at those young ages. And by the time we got around to having children, most of the people we knew socially had already had children. We were retards about having children, even though we were only in our late 20s. So we started to try to have children. She threw away her diaphragm. Uh, I didn't use condoms anymore ever, and off we went, and nothing happened. Nobody got pregnant. So after about a year, we decided we needed to go to a doctor and see if there was any problem. And we started down the infertility road. For those of you who are psychotherapists listening to me, I don't know if you've yet had some clients who have struggled with infertility, or maybe you're working currently with clients struggling with infertility. It is a nightmare to go through. It is very, very stressful. I think the statistics are that 60% of the couples who struggle with infertility wind up getting a divorce. It's very threatening. Somebody is incompetent. Somebody is causing a problem, and that person has to carry a lot of shame. Uh, the other thing that happens is that the infertility specialist takes control over the sexual experience. You're supposed to take temperatures and find out when the woman is ovulating, and you're supposed to quickly rush and have sex within some hours of her beginning to ovulate. And you're supposed to refrain from having sex and wasting a single drop of semen when it's not quite up to the ovulating window. So all spontaneity goes out of sexuality. In addition, you have to go through many tests and prods of various kinds. I grew up in a very, very anti-sexual household. And then I was tormented with an older sister who liked using talks about sex when I was 9, 10 years old to torture me and torment me. I felt very uncomfortable. I would be sent to her bedroom when house guests came, which was very frequently. My bedroom would become the guest room, and she had twin beds in her bedroom. So I was shifted over, and I would sleep in her bedroom for whatever times they were there. And she would lasciviously describe to me how she masturbated and what were the best techniques for female masturbation. I didn't know what the fuck she was talking about. It was upsetting to me. I don't know. It felt like she was being sadistic. This was the latest way she could be sadistic to me without getting into trouble. She couldn't punch me around anymore when we were younger, and she couldn't chase me around the dining table with a butcher knife anymore. My parents finally stopped that, even though it was, quote, ha ha ha, just a joke. But she could torment me by describing her lascivious attachment to her own masturbation in very vivid terms to me, where she touched herself and for how long and what thoughts she had while she was masturbating. And I felt like I was being raped. I literally felt like I was being raped. And the whole concept of masturbation for me got tinged with shame, guilt, upset, all kinds of bad things that didn't need to carry the burden of. God damn it. And I had a lot of trouble trying to masturbate when I became an adolescent because she was frequently asking me, did I say have well, she started when I was 10. Have you started jacking off yet? She would ask me. I didn't want to talk to her about it. Then she offered she would help me. She would show me how to do it. I didn't want any part of that either. I'm telling you, it felt over and over again like I was being raped. So here I was in my late 20s with a very ambivalent relationship with masturbation. It was hard for me to touch myself. I learned how to get young women to touch me and masturbate me. That wasn't, I didn't have to feel guilty about that. And I could relax into the pleasure of that because I wasn't doing it. It was them enacting parts of what goes on between a man and a woman. So it was okay. My own touching myself was never okay. But now I had to start going to the doctor. And every once in a while, the doctor wanted to get a sperm count from me. So he would put me in a special room he had. It had drawers full of pornography in there if I wanted to read pornography. And somebody was waiting outside the door, knowing I was going to whack at myself and that I would come and bring the specimen in. And I would freeze. I wasn't able to perform. I was ashamed that I was there masturbating. Why did they have to know that I was masturbating? Why was there somebody outside the door waiting for the product of my masturbation? All of this was a nightmare. As the infertility time went on, since we didn't live too far from the doctor's place, I got an agreement that he would give me a little bottle. I could masturbate at home and I could rush to drive it to the doctor as fast as possible after I had ejaculated. And even that, even when I was home alone, I would schedule the appointments at a time when my wife was at work so I could have the house all to myself. It was still always endlessly hard for me to have any kind of orgasm through masturbation. It had gotten so contaminated by my growing up. So that was unpleasant about infertility. And then it turned out that a diagnosis was finally made. My sperm count was fine. There was sufficient sperm. They were healthy enough. I was not contributing to the problem of infertility. In some ways, my wife wasn't contributing to the problem of infertility either. She literally had an allergy to my sperm. She would secrete something after I would ejaculate. It would irritate something in her, and she would excrete some kind of sticky poison inside her vagina that would kill my semen. And doctor said this is a real problem. And in my mystical fashion, I said, I have started doubting whether this is a good marriage for me. Maybe this is the final straw. I'm with the wrong person. I'm with somebody who kills my semen, even though we want to get pregnant. What the hell am I doing here? But I suspended all that and suppressed it, of course, and went on with my commitment. We're going to get pregnant. So now sex became even more terrible. We had to have sex when she was ovulating and she would take her temperature. Then she had to go lie in a bathtub and give herself a douche with some chemical that was supposed to counter the chemical that was going to follow after I came in her. And then we were to have sex. And then I were to lift her feet up in the air so that the gravity would pull the sex down further into her vagina. And then she had to get in a car and rush to the doctor so he could swab out her vagina and see what was happening in there from the various chemicals that he had put in there. How romantic. What a wonderful way to have a sexual coupling with somebody else. What sweetness, what delight. Just full of frantic tension all the time, unpleasantness, and a mechanical attempt to do something that should not be mechanical. It was just awful. And it went on month after month after month. And it was very expensive to pay all the fees and continue to have all the visits and all the tests. It's no wonder that many people get divorced if they have to go through infertility. And now the rituals are even more complicated. You can harvest eggs. You can do in vitro fertilization. You can get egg donors. You can get surrogate wombs that carry the baby. So the choices have expanded enormously, and all of it sucks. None of it is pleasant to go through, and all of it is very, very expensive. So you're having to make complicated economic decisions as well. After about a year, we decided to give up and we moved on to the next step. Yes, of course, we're going to adopt a child if it's so difficult to have a child. There are plenty of children in the world. There are plenty of children who need home. We went to the Vista Del Mar Child Study Center that has an adoption agency because we were going to get a Jewish child. We were going to honor our ethnic identity, and that was one of the places the Jewish women brought their unwanted children to. And we started through the process. About 6 months after applying, we got a phone call. There is a little boy, and they would like to place the little boy with us. Little boy was then 6 weeks of age. He had been born. He appeared healthy enough. Everything seemed to be proceeding. And I guess that's about the time the dogs are taken out of the pack at about 6 weeks. So we were going to get our own little boy. And we were full of tension, expectation, hopes. I actually hoped that if we had a child, maybe we would learn to cooperate better and life would get sweeter. You know that sweet myth. Everybody thinks if they have marital problems, all they have to do is have a child, then suddenly they will bond with each other much better. When the opposite happens to be the case most often, the stress of adapting to parenthood makes things worse and not better. So we followed Jewish tradition. My father's name was Mart. My father had died, so we were going to give him one of his names was going to be Martin. But neither of us liked that for first name, and Joshua was very popular back then, so we named him Joshua Martin Kovacs. Now, in the beginning, he was easy enough to be with. He was not a particularly cranky or particularly needy child, and I was going to be a very, very devoted father and a devoted husband. Since there was no breast milk being generated, and he went on formula right away, anybody could feed him in the night. He didn't need to be breastfed. So I volunteered to do all the night feedings. That was my gesture of goodwill to my former wife. And it was a way I thought I could have my own special bonding experience with my infant a lot. I would feed him as often as I would be able to and give her relief as often as I was able to. And I used to like we had a rocking chair. And I used to like warming the bottle, holding him on my lap, pulling him as close to me as I could, giving him the bottle, and talking to him. I talked to him about imagined things we were going to do when he was older. I talked to him, I'm going to take him to a ball game. As soon as he's 7 years old, I'm going to take him to his first ball game. I thought about teaching him how to throw a ball. I thought about all the good things we were going to share. And I started having a wonderful fantasy relationship with him. And nothing untoward happened. I don't know if I reported this in another lecture or not, but I'll visit the worst time I ever had with him. It was about, I don't know, 6 weeks seems magical. It was about 6 weeks after he came to live with us. And so he was about 12 weeks old at that time. And by that time, my former wife had decided she felt trusting enough in me and safe enough that I could manage him and she could leave for a little while. She had not been separated from him. She took leave from her teaching and she had literally not been out of the house since he first came to stay with us. She let me spell her for periods of time while she would nap or rest for a while. But she was there all the time. And for the first time, she was going out into the community and leaving me alone at home with him without her. She was going to go to the market and then she was going to go to that little park. We lived in Beverly Glen then. That little park that was near Sunset Boulevard and Beverly Glen Drive. There's a little park there. And she had a book she was reading. She was going to go do the marketing and then sit and read the book for a half hour, an hour, come home. And she told me, I think he'll be okay. I fed him and before I got ready to leave, and I changed his diaper, so you shouldn't have any problem. Maybe you should just put him down after I go, and he'll take a nap for at least a good deal of the time I'm gone. And I remembered that newborn babies sleep about 21 hours a day. Of course, they're always up and bothering you in the night, but it doesn't matter. The total time is about 21 hours with intervals for feeding and diaper changes. So she left and I picked him up and I started to put him in the crib. I put him in the crib and he started crying. He started crying lustily. He didn't seem ready to sleep. So I picked him up again and I wondered, well, maybe he hadn't had enough milk. So I warmed the milk again And I started offering milk, and he kept trying to spit out the nipple. He wasn't interested in having any more milk. That wasn't working. And I looked, oh my God, he'd had another BM, a big diarrhea BM after she had left. And I said, oh boy, I better change him and clean him up. And for those of you who are watching, I'm sure you're all too young to remember, everybody used to use cloth diapers. You had a big stack of cloth diapers in one of the bathrooms, and you had a diaper pail with a scent thing in the lid, because what you did was you took all the dirty diapers, you washed them in the toilet sort of to wash the fecal material out of them, and then you threw them in the diaper pail and you closed the diaper pail, and there was kind of a deodorant there. You would build up diapers in the diaper pail twice or three times a week. The diaper service guy would come by. He would take away the old diaper pail, give you a whole stack of fresh, very clean smelling, nice, soft cloth diapers. They were wonderful. And so here I went. I had him under one arm and I had the diaper in the other hand. I went into the bathroom and I flushed the toilet so it would flush hard and so I could dump the diaper into it and wash out a good deal of the BM before I threw it in the diaper pail. And I didn't have a good hold of it. It got away from me and it went down into the drain of the toilet. So suddenly the toilet is overflowing and backing up, and shit water is flowing onto the bathroom floor. And my son is screaming, and I'm trying to pat him, and he's screaming in distress. He was naked at that point and screaming. I didn't know what the fuck was wrong, and I remembered, at least I'm handy, I remembered to turn the toilet off so it stopped filling with water and overflowing. And I figured I better get him settled. And then I'm gonna have to figure out how I'm gonna get the diaper out from in the drain down in there. So I put a clean diaper on him and I was rushing. So I managed to prick him with a diaper pin. I did that to him too and made him scream even some more. And I experienced the impulse to do hideous child abuse. I was in frustrated impotence and I couldn't stop him from screaming. All I wanted to do was to pick him up and batter his head into the wall, crack his skull, and watch his brains running down the wall, because I knew he would be dead then and he would stop screaming. I would try to make up some story of what accident had happened to kill him. And I was appalled at my own primitive reaction. Needless to say, I didn't do any of that, but the impetus and the imagery was very powerful and very strong. And I had a great deal more compassion for people who abuse children. Some of it is just adult impotent fury, trying to do goodness and being frustrated over and over again by the child who doesn't understand what you're doing and has no capacity to respond to the messages. And the child at that moment is like some hurting animal who's just crying out in pain, but there's no language to tell you what's wrong or what you need to do about it. That was a very bad moment. And I felt insanely stupid after my former wife got home, because I tried taking him out in the car. I knew the car riding is often soothing and it helped a little, but not very much. He was still crying a lot. And then I went back and I was just walking around patting him and walking around patting him and hoping the motion of my walking him would calm him down. Again, intermittently, he'd stop for a few seconds and then scream again. She finally came in. She said, "What's the matter? I haven't been able to get him to sleep. Let me look at him." And she took him and she said, "He's overtired. You should have just left him in bed for a few more moments. He would go to sleep." And she put him down, and within 2 minutes, he stopped crying and immediately went into a deep sleep. So much for all my trying to be helpful. Well, that's an example of a very bad moment. We didn't have that many bad moments, though. Uh, Actually, I think for a little while, maybe our relationship was kinder and more respectful. We took him out for walks in the neighborhood a lot. We took him to visit friends and relatives a lot. He seemed like a reasonably well-disposed child. Didn't cause any concern. We had two well baby visits with the pediatrician over the months ahead, and he noticed there were some anomalies. He said I'm not sure he doesn't need glasses, but you have to wait till he's at least a year old. And I think he needs an eye examination. And he had three teeth, he had three upper teeth in his mouth that were all fused together and were a single tooth. And the doctor said, I don't know what caused that. That's really very strange. But on we went. And at 9 months, we had a ceremony in civil court and the adoption was made final. Then by 12 months, the pediatrician said, well, things are within normal limits, but he sat up a little slowly. He's starting to crawl even more slowly. Some of the benchmarks of developmental landmarks seem to be slowing down. I think we're going to have to watch this child. And by the time he was 16 months old, the pediatrician told us he had very bad news for us. That our child was really very handicapped, and for sure we needed to get his vision tested. And he said he's hitting his developmental landmarks slower and slower. I don't know what the outcome of this is going to be, but I need to prepare you. He may need a lot of special attention. He may need speech therapy. He may need special education. I don't know what else may come up. He may never achieve very much. It's too early to say, and I don't want to scare you too much. But once again, I was in an impotent fury. Why were we given a damaged child like that? Didn't nobody know? Did nobody suspect? Here we were after all that misery of going through for infertility and making the decision to adopt. We had given what might be a profoundly damaged child to raise. I'll tell you what I'm really angry about. At that point, I was wondering, could we go to court for negligence? Could we have the adoption voided? I gave voice to those thoughts. Is there anything we can do legally so we don't get stuck with having to go through this? And my former wife was furious with me. She somehow had a new mission. Her new mission was to watch over this child who's damaged and to make him into the best, the highest functioning, and the most capable human being he could be turned into. He became her immortality project. She wound up giving seminars on this topic later on. He became her, to use French words, cause célèbre. He was the reason for her existence, and all her energy was being poured into him. Needless to say, I was pushed even farther in the background. What I wanted or what mattered came to matter even less than it had before the child had come, because now, 24/7, she was trying to figure out how to soothe him, how to keep him comfortable, and how to make a good life for him. I will fast forward a little bit because my bitterness was only expanded. Uh, when he was in his 20s, we finally found out from the adoption agency that he knew he might be a damaged child, and they had purposely given him to us because, after all, I was a psychologist and my wife was a teacher. And if anybody would take good care of him, we would be the people who would take good care of him. And we were the perfect family to get a child who might be damaged. That was a gift we got from the adoption agency. They didn't say anything about that to us, of course, that they were giving us this wonderful gift. Now my strange sense of humor kicks in. He was wonderful in a different way. The fact that he was so screwed up and that I could never come to a common cause with my former wife about what to do with him and how to manage him was finally one of the things that helped me separate from her. We really had irreconcilable differences. And the worst irreconcilable differences were differences in how best to lead him on his path forward. I wanted as early as possible to have diagnostic studies done If he was going to need special education, I wanted to start it as early as possible. If he was going to need speech therapy, I wanted to start that as fast as possible. Whatever he was to need, if he needed glasses, let's get him tested. Let's get glasses on him. I wanted him to rise with the help of experts to his best potential. And I even started talking when he was 2 years old about the fact that it may not be us who are the best people to raise him. Let us find a good boarding facility for him and let him be raised by experts who know what to do with children like this. Because even though I'm a psychologist, I'm certainly not a specialist in this. And I don't like what you're doing at all. Her way of raising him was there was a single principle: make him as comfortable as possible. And I would argue with her, no, he's going to have to work harder at everything because his equipment for working has been partly broken and he's going to have to work harder. I don't want him necessarily to be comfortable. I want him to learn to stretch, to struggle, to fight to become. So what was she doing? She was giving him ice cream every time he was crying. She was giving him lots of cookies. She was keeping him from exercising. She would carry him around if he wanted to be picked up. She was just keeping him comfortable and, quote, spoiling him from my perspective. She wasn't challenging him in any way possible. He began to become obese by the time he was 3. By the time he was 7, he was on the edge of I'm having a senior moment. What's the disease you get from not being able to digest sugar properly?
Diabetes.
Diabetes. He was pre-diabetic at age 7 already and grossly overweight. She never washed him very thoroughly. If she tried to wash his hair, he would cry and protest, and she would stop. He had lots of old food caked in his hair. He had dirt ground into his skin that had never been properly scrubbed off him. Uh, it was a nightmare. Now it became every worse because I left. I finally got out of there. Not before we didn't have a second child. So I need to talk about my lousy parenting with each one of them. I will stick with Josh for now because he was the oldest and the first. I didn't come into the lives of my stepchildren until they were 8 and 6, and I was significantly older. Josh was the oldest child I had to interact with in the beginning, and I spent 5 years living with him before I left. Back then, we had a second child by then, Naomi, who I'll be talking about. She was 3 years younger than he was, so she was 2 when I left. She was also adopted, of course. That was part of what I had to do to get ready to leave. I felt terrible back then. The state law and the expectation of the courts was that minor children would remain with their mothers. And the fathers would be given what was called reasonable visitation rights, unspecified. So I knew that she was going to be the primary parent. And I felt guilty about leaving her with him, even though she was celebrating what a wonderful challenge it was to be his parent. And that I could not leave without adopting a second child, hopefully second child who would be somebody who fulfilled other dreams of sweetness, dreams of accomplishment, some dreams of having a delightful child around. So we adopted Naomi. And she did fulfill those promises, as a matter of fact. As damaged as he was, that's how special she was. They were an odd pair, the two of them. But it helped me to leave knowing that Naomi was there. But Josh did not like it that I had leave because his mother did not like it that I had left. I betrayed her. I'd given her not only the child, but the second thing she wanted. The second thing was a better house and a bigger house than we lived in. She was a big social climber, and our friends had achieved greater financial success than we did. And she felt sulky that they had bigger, nicer houses. So I mortgaged myself to the hilt and I acquired a house in Westwood, south of Wilshire Boulevard, a very nice English Tudor house, and moved everybody in, the two children and her, and she was happy in the house. And as part of my separation agreement, she was going to inherit the house and I would be responsible for it, even though I wasn't living there. So I left her with another child to fulfill her, and I left her for a house that she could, with a house that she could feel good about living in. And much to my surprise, 6 weeks after I left, another 6 week mark, she was living with another man. Obviously, she had been doing something. I don't believe she just met him and suddenly he moved in with her. I'm sure she was having at least a platonic, but probably a sexual relationship with him for some time before I left. And to my surprise, I thought that would make things more peaceful between the two of us. After all, she was left with good tools for building a life and somebody else who was going to be her companion. But no, she hated me. It was so apparent what a apparent transference she had to me, because even though she was going to be fine and have a new companion and everything else, a parent does not abandon a child, and I had abandoned her. And she was furious and she wanted to punish me. And she made it very clear to Josh, who was then 5, and to Naomi, who was 2, that I was a terrible person. And they were supposed to go into emotional orbit around her and have as little as possible to do with me. I was fighting that uphill battle because I was a scumbag. I was an immoral scumbag who didn't deserve to have the pleasure of the company of his children. And when they did come, I, I once kept a journal, because that's another story I will be telling, how I sued for custody of Naomi. I started keeping a journal of when I had requested visitation and when I got visitation. And 82% of the time I had requested visitation, there was some excuse why one or another child shouldn't come be with me. After a while, we started separating the visits. We didn't want Josh and Naomi coming at the same time, because Josh would suck up all the air in the place. He would throw tantrums. He would be difficult. He would be demanding. And Naomi, as she was at home, was expected to take the back seat. One of the things I was worried about with her, that I will be talking about more when I talk about her, is she was asked to grow up too damn fast. She was the parentified child. She was supposed to help out with her brother, and her life didn't matter. And I thought that was terrible. So I was going to try and get custody of her. But I will stick with Josh. He was successfully taught that I was not a good person, and he would cry and protest that he didn't want to visit. He would throw tantrums and ask to be taken back to his mother. Why? Because we didn't let him do things like stand up on the coffee table and start peeing on it. We would interrupt him and tell him he has to go to the bathroom. If he did that at home, that was fine with his mother. That's how he needed to express himself. So he needed to express himself. We tried to clean him up and give him clean clothes and scrub him. And he would fight like hell to avoid doing that. And we didn't indulge him with whatever meals he wanted. Mainly, he wanted hot dogs and tacos. That's all he wanted to eat. We insisted that he taste a few other foods and start expanding his palate. And he would throw food and throw temper tantrums and refuse. And take me home to my mommy, he would say. And it was not good. It really was not good. And we kept trying. We saw him less and less and tried to see Naomi more and more. We said, all right, you don't want to be here. Okay, we will drive you home this time. When he was 14 years old, finally I'd gotten my way. And at age 10, he was finally put in the Devereaux Foundation. He went to boarding school. And of course, every weekend he was free, he was brought home to be with his mother again. But he would visit with us occasionally. And when he was 14, he said, I never want to see you again. Leave me with my mommy. And that's what happened. I have never seen him again. I did not fight for him. I did not try to remain in his life. I hated and resented him. I didn't want him in the first place because he was so damaged. I didn't like finding out that the adoption agency wanted us to make him the center of our existence, and purposely gave a damaged child to us. If there had been a ceremony that I could have gone through that would have allowed me to divorce him, like one divorces his spouse, I would have divorced him. I found no redeeming pleasure in anything I did with him. And I was always comparing and contrasting him with the child I had always yearned for. And he could never pass that test. I am not a selfless person that can love damaged people and just do good for them with no thought of any return for the self. I am unable to do that. I'm confessing that's one of my limits. And it felt like a liberation when he said he didn't want to see me anymore. I think the fact that I was able to divorce him, when I get the story too, damaged my relationship with my adopted daughter. I confirmed for her that I was the abandoner. I was not a good human being. I was an immoral person. And I frequently feel like an immoral person. I get stories about him every once in a while that come back to me. Although interestingly enough, his sister, as she gets well into her midlife, she is not wanting to visit him anymore either. She's finally getting burned out. So I don't hear any current stories. But I knew up until the time he was well into his 40s, his life in a Devereaux closed, so he went to a board and care facility after that. His life there consisted of the same simplicity of the life he wanted when he used to come visit me. He loved having somebody bring him ice cream to eat. He loved playing with little toy trucks, and he loved listening to rock and roll CDs. And that's all he was interested in. His measured IQ turned out to be in the high 60s when it was finally possible to measure any IQ. He did learn to read a little bit and to write a little bit. He even had, under a special federal program, he even had a job he did for a while, putting things up on a grocery shelf, and didn't seem to mind doing that. But that program fell apart and he stopped doing that at all. So I have no idea what he does with his days now. My guess is he's still playing with trucks, watching television, and listening to rock and roll records and eating as much as ice cream as he can get. So that's one thing I feel horrible about. I do not visit him. And how old is he now? He is 65, I think he is. And I haven't seen him since he was 14. I know he's still alive as far as no, I don't know for sure he's still alive, but I believe he's still alive. And I have cold, locked the door in his face, thrown the key away. Every once in a while, I think maybe I should visit him before he dies or before I die. And I have nostalgia and longing that I go through, and then I talk myself out of it and don't do it. So that's story number one, something I can hate myself for. I'm not noble. I'm petty. The mantra I started saying to myself is, I want to spend my life with the living. I want to spend my life with people who can make a difference in the world of some kind, who people are genuinely dedicated to their own improvement, my clients, to some of my clients who are doing excellent and important things in the world, and I can help them to do it more effectively. I like talking to graduate students in my field. They're going to go out into the world and make a difference. I like conferring with colleagues about how we can all become more effective. Doing goodness and making the world a better place is very important to me. And I have no time to want to spend time with those who just need to be comforted and left alone. That does not appeal to me. I can't find any satisfaction in it. There are many Christian folk who think that such people as my son are God's handicap and that they're being tested. Can they love unconditionally, even with all the limitations and frustrations? And they rise to that as a holy quest that they're on. I don't envy them. I think they're fools. And at the same time, there's some beautiful simplicity in what they're saying and doing. And I'm tormented. And I don't feel proud of myself at all. I will start the journey with Naomi. I don't think I'll get through it today. It was much more complicated. She was delightful and adorable. She didn't have any trouble coming and having a good time in our house. I was, by the time she was 3, I was already starting to live with the children who would become her stepsisters and getting ready to marry her stepmother. And she was always welcome in that house. And I was learning a lot from Hermine about how to be a good parent to her. One example that occurs to me was I felt so guilty about Naomi. I was the restitution child in my family. I was had and brought to life in order to make up for my mother's sin of having had an abortion, and she was the restitution child. She was my going away present to her mother because I was going to abandon her brother, and she was going to make up to her mother for. She would be the bright one, the lovely one, the delightful one, and the accomplished one. So her mother wouldn't have to be terribly done in by having nothing but a damaged child to raise. She and I had that in common. But she was very comfortable being a child in our house. She never asked to go home. I was fortunate. Her older step siblings, let's see, they were 6 and 8 when she came for the first time, and she was 3. They took to her. They liked having a smaller child around. They liked playing with her. They were happy to do that. And Hermine liked having her around too. Hermine and she developed an obsession together. Back then, Hermine liked going to garage sales. She liked picking over them and trying to find some quirky thing that she could bring home that was interesting that she could get for a song. And by the time Naomi was 7, she was learning how to do that too. And every time Naomi came, she said, "Can we find a garage sale to go to?" And they would go off together and leave me with Josh. And they would go have a good time. So she was very much at home, but she was very guilty. She couldn't indicate that she enjoyed coming to see us. And she was also made the messenger. She was told where she would show up and she would say, "My mommy said you should change where you're having me sleep. I shouldn't be on a sleeping bag in that room. That room so it looks like it could be drafty. You have to ask one of the older children to give up their bed and let me sleep in that bed so I can have a bed." She would parrot what her mother was telling her, and her mother was constantly trying to interfere with the flow of what we were eating, what recreation we were doing, where we were going, which restaurants we were going out to, what vacations we were trying to take. My former wife was an expert on changing that because they weren't the right things for her mean stepchildren to be engaging with. And that was disgusting and awful. Many fights went on. We progressed though. Two things I learned from Hermine. One was early in Naomi's visiting with us, she and Josh and the 2 stepkids were playing something somewhere in another room. And Naomi had some toy of hers with her, and the toy broke. And she got upset and she came running to me with the toy and said, "Daddy, my toy's broke. Could you fix it?" I said, "Yeah, here, let's go back to the other room. I have some tools in there and I'll take care of it." And Hermine said, "Wait." I said, "Wait?" She said, "You don't have to go right now." I said, "Yes, I do. Her toy's broken. I'm going to fix it." And I left. And I came back and Hermine said to me, "Look, she's getting older now. She's 3. Developmentally, it's time for her to learn sharing and the rituals of who's important and who is different. And she said, you don't have to make Christmas for her every time she wants something. You don't have to drop what you're doing and immediately interrupt it and go. You could have said, this is what I'd like. Hermine and I are in the middle of a conversation. It'll take 2 or 3 minutes for us to stop. Go back with the toy. I'll be there in 2 or 3 minutes. I know that'll seem like a long time, but it really won't be a terribly long time. And you wait until I'm finished with Hermine. She said, you need to teach her adults are more important than children. Children just don't get whatever they want if they ask an adult for it. Your former wife does that with Josh. That's not a good model to start with her, too. Just give her whatever she wants whenever she wants it. And I got furious. I said, you're interfering in my relationship with my child. And she said, well, I don't know if I'm interfering in your relationship with your child. I have a different view of what good parenting for her would be, and I'm trying to educate her with what view I have. I can't compel you to do that. You can take my advice, listen to it, throw it away, do whatever you want. I'm not trying to dictate anything to you, but I really believe in what I'm telling you. And by this time, she had tears in her eyes because I was yelling at her very badly. And telling her how fuck this was and expressing doubt about whether I'd done a wise thing coming to live with her or not. I was just really upset. I was in a competition with my former wife. I wanted some allegiance and loyalty from my children, and the only way I thought I could do that was to make Christmas for them, as she accused me of every time they came, and give them some special, wonderful experience. So my house would be more glamorous and more interesting than the other house they were leaving. That's a very bad competition for parents to get into. I know that now, but I was only beginning to learn that from my present wife, thank goodness. Next thing she said to me about a year later, she said, every time Diane, your former wife, calls, you return the phone call, and then you're in some kind of argument. You get upset, and she tells you bitchy things and disappointing things, and she carries on the same devaluation of you she used to when you were married. Now that you're separated, the content has just shifted, but it's the same thing. She tells you what a stupid, idiot, cruel, unfeeling, incompetent person you are over and over again, and you don't deserve to be with your children. She said, stop talking to her. I said, how can I stop talking to her? And she said, well, look, I'm divorced too. There are only two things you ever have to talk to her about. Does there need to be a change in a scheduled visit? That, yes, that needs to be talked about. And is there, you have a money agreement? Does the money agreement need to be changed for some reason? Those are the only two topics that there probably will be some conflicts about. Where the kids sleep, what they eat, where they sit in the car, all that crap she wants to dictate you about. She had no right to dictate any of it. No court's going to listen to that from her. She said, I always ask, what's going to happen if you go to court? You think she's going to win a suit that Naomi has to be seated next to you in the front seat in her car seat? Our car seat's never to be bolted in the back seat of the car, and your present wife, is to sit in the front seat? No, she's not going to win that in court. No judge is going to order that. She said, why don't you just tell her that you're not going to talk to her anymore? If there's a problem with visitation or with money, she should leave a message for you in the middle of the night on the answering machine so you don't have to listen to it, and you'll get back to her. If she doesn't like that, she can talk to her lawyer, who can talk to your lawyer, and the lawyers will talk to each other. And I said, that's going to be very expensive if we do that. And then Hermine said, I have an even better idea. I want you to write her a letter and say, it's silly for the two of you to be upset with each other all the time. Seems like every time you talk, there's an argument, bad feeling. It gets unresolved and unsolved. So you're going to stop. You don't want to upset her, and you don't want to be upset by her. So you're appointing Hermine Kovacs, your present wife, to represent you in any possible negotiations that go on. And there are only two she'll even talk about. One is a change in visitation, and the other is if there is a problem with the support money that's being paid to you and to the children. If there needs to be a change in the divorce money for some reason, or some scheduled visit is not going to take place, yes, I will have a conversation with you about that. Anything else, leave it on the answering machine or send us a postcard. But he is never going to talk to you again. Never. And the letter went. I agreed to do that. I was terrified. What's going to happen? Of course, she immediately calls, testing me to see if I'll pick up the phone, and I'm not picking up the phone. I didn't do it. She calls me when I'm at the office on the office phone, trying to get me to pick up the phone. I stuck to my my guns. I never talked to her again. Oh, and Hermine started talking to her, and she hated that. And that was wonderful because that was aversive. If she got Hermine on the phone, that was very unpleasant. So she found fewer and fewer reasons to keep calling because the only person she got to talk to if she was calling about anything was Hermine, her hated rival. Oh, that's a memory. Once she was at some gathering and she was introduced, and somebody introduced her to somebody else as this is Mrs. Kovacs. She still was using my last name, even though she was living with another man. And the person said, she's Mrs. Kovacs? No, I've been introduced to Mrs. Kovacs. Mrs. Kovacs is Hermine Kovacs. And she said, no, I'm the real Mrs. Kovacs. That's what my former wife said. She was the real Mrs. Kovacs, and I was married to an imposter. Oh my God. All right. I will start here and talk about how I screwed up my relationship with Naomi. And that's it for today. So let us unmute and you can tell me whatever you want to say about my derelictions of duty.
I have a couple kind of comments and questions, Arthur. Um, did Joshua, as your adopted son, represent something for you when he first came in the picture?
Oh, he certainly did. I had all kinds of dreams. I had had very bad parenting from my father and an autocratic, unpleasant relationship with him with a few moments of goodness. And I wanted to be a kind, loving, supportive, present father for my child. I was going to repair myself. And I think that does happen. If we can be a different child to our own, a different parent to our own children, we repair ourselves in the process. And I was going to be cheated out of the possibility because of his limitations.
And for that reason, that is why you abandoned him.
Yeah, that was a real broken dream. It was too painful to see him over and over again. It reminded me of what I longed for and couldn't have.
Hmm. Okay. The other thing in some ways is that in the course of your, illustrious career, you've dealt and worked with many, many damaged people,
Yeah.
you know, but
Oh, but I have inevitable optimism. I love severely damaged people. I'm going to rescue them.
yeah.
The
So,
severely damaged people I've seen do not have severely damaged equipment. They have a lack of information. They have stupid ideas. They have a need to be self-defeating. They have all kinds of psychological things I can play around with that can lead them out of their damaged place into a better life. I'm not impotent like I was with Josh. I'm challenged. That's a delightful challenge. That's
so,
really doing good in the world.
so you never thought that any of Josh's equipment could be repaired.
No, it could not be.
Okay.
He is going to wear thick glasses for the rest of his life. He has a hearing problem too, and has to wear hearing aids. And his teeth are fused together. Oh, we found out subsequently too that his birth mother, who was a nurse, took massive doses of quinine because she believed if she took massive doses of quinine, she would have an abortion. So the broth in which he was raised in the womb in the early months of his life was a very toxic broth he was swimming in.
Are you still supporting him?
No, the state is supporting him.
I see. Okay.
And once he turned 18, I had no further legal responsibility to support him. And the state, we have a wonderful welfare state. The state will warehouse destitute people over 18.
If you ever should decide to visit him, I'd be honored to accompany you and keep you company.
I'll be doing a lot of crying if I do.
I'd be happy to, though.
Thank you for your kind offer. My wife will come too. She's always said if I changed my mind, she'd come with me too. We can arrange a traveling troupe of visitors. Oh, I'm scared to go.
Yeah.
Not that the experience itself would be a bad one. From the tears I'm already shedding, I think it would be a very moving experience. But that will give me more cause to hate myself that I haven't gone before, that I waited so long.
Well, being one of the secular priests in residence, I'd like to, I have the power to do this being a psychologist. I'm going to forgive young Arthur Kovacs for all his mistakes and acknowledging that he did the best he could given his circumstances.
And perhaps you've kind of made up.
Well, that's an
all of-
interesting thing. I did do the best I could, but I didn't do the best I could by him. I did not make him the chief priority in my life. I made him an afterthought if I had anything left over, and I was so busy, I decided I really didn't have anything worthwhile left over.
You think you've made up for it?
Yeah, I could sit here at this moment since I confessed my sin, and I could rattle off a list of things that I think have been worthwhile and admirable that I've done. And that's certainly a comfort to me. I have put the time that I spared not drowning in his quicksand. I have put that to what seems like useful and purposes that have had a good effect on the world or some part of the world. So maybe I should go and thank him for not draining me. Hmm. And I envy you two guys. You were never cursed with infertility problems.
Well, no, I went through it.
Did you? Oh, that's right. You had to go through it too.
You only had to publicly masturbate once. I did it 27 times.
Oh no, I had to do it about 4 or 5. I had to do it about 4 or 5 times.
I addressed it with humor. I went into the room and then I poked my head back out immediately, saying that we might need a bigger specimen cup. This might not work.
And my daughter, who's at her dance class right now, and who's killing it in terms of her mock trial class in 8th grade, is an IVS baby.
Oh,
So I was in that room too.
Yeah.
Maybe not 27 times.
We had done insemination, so that was 13 cycles, so it was 2 times per cycle, and
oh God.
and then a troublesome pregnancy.
Oh, what? The doctor was using a turkey baster to put your semen inside you?
Yeah, but it had to be processed first. They have to
Okay.
remove all the proteins to make it more viable, and there's a whole process. Yeah.
I guess that wasn't invented. Maybe if they had had that, they could have sent a different version of my sperm into my former wife's vagina, and it may have taken.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I was imagining that happening. I was imagining that a really wonderful baby boy had been born. And I was really trapped. I never got a divorce. I wasn't going to leave my boy. And I lived in a miserable marriage just so I could be close to my son. And I probably would have ruined him with the power of my attachment to him and suffocated him, because he would have been my prime companion rather than the wife I didn't have. Oh, and I would have been a chronic adulterer, trying to hide that all the time. As I said, Josh liberated me. He sent me off into my freedom because he existed. And I wasn't going to be a martyr. Wow. I could thank him for that too.
Yeah.
All right, it is time today. I will send you the descriptor for the other program.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.